My name is Hershel Farrow, and I would tell you in the first place, never name a kid Hershel. I've had nicknames all my life. My first nickname was John the Runt, and that's what I thought my name was until I was 3 years old. And then it was Shorty, and so forth. Dad's name was William Jesse Farrow, and my mother's name was Anna Pearlie Morrow. And they met and married in Lincoln County, Oklahoma. And my oldest brother, Manford, was born there. The next one was named Roman, but we called him Romy. The third was named Rex, then me, then my sister Melba, and my kid brother was Joe. In 1925, the day after Christmas, my parents and my grandparents on both sides loaded up in covered wagons at Perkins, Oklahoma, and headed for Arkansas. They came here because the kids wasn't growing and doing very well, and the doctor told them needed to get them to some good water, and they said, "Where'd that be?" And he said, "Siloam Springs, Arkansas." They got to Siloam Springs on the 5th day of January of 1926, and on the next day, 6th of January, they come down to Cincinnati. My grandparents on my mother's side, the Will Morrows, got a job clearing the timber and brush off the hill behind what's now the Methodist Church. And they stayed in the area. Dad's folks went on back to Randolph County, where Dad was born. And my folks stayed here until March, and they went to Randolph County and then come back in October. They traveled about 750 miles in covered wagons that year. In 1927, Dad made a sharecrop with Het Gilruth, and they lived in Rag Holler, if you know where that. I don't know exactly where, I know approximately where it's at, right over there. And let's see, then in 1928, my second brother was born where the Renick Road crosses Wilson Creek, down the creek there on what they call the Wilson Place in January of 1928. My next brother was born in 1930, July 1930, at Perkins, Oklahoma. I was born on the George Spears Place, across the creek from where Kendall lives, in 1932. And my kid sister was born in 1935 on Osage Creek in Benton County up above Healing Springs. And my kid brother, then in January of 36, that was the dry year, we moved back to Randolph County where Dad was raised. And my kid brother was born there in 1940. I'm the only one of my siblings left alive. And I got out of the Army in 1954 for the same reason Dwight Eisenhower did. He had 5 stars and I had 4 stripes, and we'd both gone as far as we could in the Army. I married Shirley Bryant in 1954, and we went back to Flint, Michigan, where I had a job with General Motors, and stayed until 61. And we come back to the farm, and for 52 years I milked cows for a living. I got up every morning at 4 o'clock and went to the barn and milked cows. And we sold the cows in 2013. And now I lay in bed till 5 o'clock in the morning and get up and doctor my bed sores. And if you want to know the joy of milking cows, I'll tell you a story about that. A fellow went to the doctor and wasn't doing good, and the doctor gave him an examination and come back and told him, said, "Son, I've got bad news for you. You've got cancer. It's terminal. You can get a second opinion, but it won't matter." Said, "It's terminal and we can't do a thing for you." The old boy said, "Doc, that sure is bad news. How long have I got?" He said, "You've got 6 months." He said, "Well now, Doc, if it was you, what would you do?" Doc said, "Well, now if it was me, here's what I'd do. The first thing I'd do, I'd go buy myself a dairy farm. The second thing I'd do, I'd hunt up the ugliest, loudest mouthed woman I could find and I'd marry her." He said, "Doc, how's that going to help my cancer?" Doc said, "It won't do a thing for your cancer, but it'll be the longest 6 months you ever lived."
How has the dairy business changed over the years from when you started to when you...
Well, now, as I was growing up, we milked cows, but we done it by hand. And you're out there, all kinds of weather doing this. We got tired of doing this, so we trained the cows. When we took a halt, just jump up and down, we did that.
When did you become using automatic things with your...
In 61.
In 61.
Actually, Shirley's folks, Gigi Bryant and Velma Bryant, had started milking when they moved to the farm in 46. And we come back and went in partnership with them, and they already had milking machines. I've been married to that woman for 63 years. And I've enjoyed good health, and I give her a lot of the credit. See, when we got married, we agreed that if one of us got mad, the other would get out of the house till he cooled off. And for 63 years, I've led a very active outdoor life, lots of fresh air, sunshine, and exercise.
Your wife will just love that.
Pardon?
Your wife will just love that.
Well, she's heard it. Actually, I got one better than that she'll love. I've only been married once, but I've got 17 wives. See, when we standing before the preacher to be married, he asked me, "Do you take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife?" And I started to say I do. But then he said, 4 better, 4 worse, 4 richer, and 4 poor. I started looking around for all them others, and Shirley and the preacher both thought I was looking for the door. She slammed me in the ribs with her elbows, and I said, "Aha!" The preacher said, "Close enough, you're married." I hadn't been married with her for just a little while until I found out that all 17 of them women is rolled up together in one skin. And I had to figure out which one I was dealing with at any given moment. Now, just for the record, the girl I married and the 4 better ones have been a joy and a pleasure for all these years. The 4 worse ones ain't nobody can get along with. The 4 richer ones are spending money faster than I can make it. The 4 poor ones have never had a thing. They can be looking at a closet full of clothes and not have a thing to wear. They don't have a thing to keep house with, and they don't have a thing to cook. And people wondered why my hair fell out.
Was your wife a level-headed woman?
See, things have changed a lot in my lifetime. When I grew up over in Randolph County, we had quite a few level-headed women. And you can tell a level-headed woman because tobacco juice runs out of both corners of their mouth. And the other thing that I would tell you, when I was growing up, everybody had an outhouse in the backyard. They cooked 3 meals a day on a wood-fired cook stove in the kitchen and ate at the kitchen table. These days, everybody cooks and eats in the backyard, goes in the house to do their business, and calls that progress. I have a son that still lives right up on the hill from me, he and his wife, and my daughter lives across the river a couple of miles from me, not where the crow flies though, and they have 2 daughters. Now, I don't have any grandsons, and I told that son-in-law that anybody can make a girl. They've got the pattern right in front of them. And I don't know, tell you something else about son-in-laws. One of the great mysteries of life is how a 2-bit son-in-law can be the father of a $1 million grandbaby. And the other mystery that goes right with it is why it is that each one of us has to take our turn of being the 2-bit son-in-law. You asked me what kind of chores I did. Now, this is something you have to understand. Back then you had 6 kids in your family. 1 or 2 kids was unusual. And I got my first chore, home chore, at 5. We burned wood to cook with and heat with and everything, and we had what we called the wood yard out here. And my job was to gather kindling out of the wood yard for Dad to build fires with in the morning at 5. And I'd better get enough. And the other thing was, the whole family had to work. So we picked cotton. Now, until I was 6 years old, I would have the whole family go to the field. We'd go over around Blytheville, Arkansas, or Black River Bottoms, around Walnut Ridge and places like that. In the fall, they even closed the school to pick cotton. And I was putting cotton in Dad's sack or Mom's sack and just play it around. When I was 6 years old, my mom took a piece of cloth and made a strap and sewed it onto a feed sack. And I was a cotton picker then. I picked about far from here to the edge of that rug and then started to play. You'd be surprised how persuasive a cotton stalk can be. And when I was in 1940, my kid brother was born. I was still 7 years old, he was born in May and I wouldn't be 8 until July. And Dad and 2 of my brothers, Rex and Romy, my oldest brother stayed home to take care of Mom. And we loaded on the back of about 20 of us, on the back of a 1.5-ton truck, and come up here in Missouri to pick strawberries for 2 1/4 cents a quart. And I could make $1 a day on my best day, pick 40 quarts. We picked cotton for 50 cents a hundred and then 75 cents a hundred. And when I was 9 years old, I could pick 150 pounds. So, and you put that all together, the whole family went to the field at daylight when it's light enough to see the cotton to pick, and picked until dark. And we went over about Peach Orchard, Arkansas, and picked cotton in a 40-acre field. And you pick a row of cotton and you'd have anywhere from 90 to 110 pounds on that one row. And there was a fella there by the name of Randall Redmond, and he was just about 20 years old. He started when the rest of us did, and he quit before sundown and went to the house. But he never quit until he'd picked 500 pounds. I seen him go back and pick 2 pounds to have his 500. He said that's a day's work, and nobody could argue with him. In the spring, sometimes Dad would go to the wheat harvest out in Kansas and follow it for 2 or 3 weeks and make pretty good money. That's how we stayed alive.
What was the hardest thing about picking?
You're bending over, and then them dried cotton bolls would pick at your fingers as you picked, because you had to pick fast, and your fingers would be sore. Another thing that I would tell you about big families. My grandmother Morrow had 12 children, and it all happened because she was hard of hearing. Every night when they went to bed, Grandpa would say, "Well, you want to go to sleep or what?" And she'd say, "What?" But back then you could tell what was going on just by the kid's birthday. Now, my oldest brother was born on November the 16th. And I started checking back. Well, the 14th of February is Valentine's Day. But the problem was my mother's birthday was the 16th of February. And after I was grown, and had kids of my own, I told her I couldn't figure out whether he was a Valentine or a birthday present. And she looked at me and said, "Oh, bosh." I don't know where that come from, but I never mentioned it again.
So who were some of your neighbors while y'all lived here?
When we lived here,
Mm-hmm.
Curtis Jones, do you know anyone remember him?
Alan's dad.
He was the wild man. Hershel Dunlap, Hannah Wilson, Homer Foster, and Mike Griffin, Dennis Griffin. We moved to Randolph County in 1936 and stayed there till 47. And I went to school in a one-room schoolhouse, several different places as we moved around. And Dad in the early 40s bought a farm, and then we went to 2 different schools from there till I was finished the 8th grade. And there wasn't no high school closer than Pocahontas, which was 20 miles away. But one of the neighbor boys, his dad run a country store, and he was going to Couch, Missouri to high school. And what he did, he drove a car up to the state line and caught the school bus. So when I was old enough, I went to, in 45, I'd ride that up to the state line with him and ride the school bus up to Couch, Missouri, and went to high school in 45 and 46, and then in 47 I started in the 10th grade. And fall, about October of 47 we moved to Michigan, and I finished the 10th grade in Michigan. And by that time I was pretty smart. And I quit after I got out of school in 48 and got a job. I worked for a dental supply house that had offices on the 10th floor of the Mott Foundation building there in Flint. And C.S. Mott was one of General Motors' biggest stockholders at the time. And this dental supply house, they supplied the dentists and the laboratories in town, and they would call up and give them an order for some supplies, and I would take that supplies and deliver it. The city at that time had a trolley system, and they'd buy a bundle of trolley tickets, and I'd run all over town. And my dad bought a 41 Chevrolet half-ton pickup with overload springs and big tires on the back, and we hauled coal. Everybody burned coal back then, and we hauled coal for the coal yard in the wintertime, and I done that some. And it's a different time. We didn't even lock doors back in then, and nobody was bothered. Now the one thing that was different, women could walk down the street and be safe at night. In the daytime, they'd get wolf whistles. Wheel, wheel. Well, now you wouldn't dare do that today. They'd probably put you in jail. I remember when I was a kid, they used to bale hay with an old horse-powered baler. You remember them? Mm-hmm. And when I was about 8 years old, I'd follow the horse. And you had to know, because when it'd come around and trip, and then it'd go back, the plunger would go back and they'd feed it. You didn't drive the horse when it hit. Now some horses didn't need driving. They just go along. But that was a different time. I grew up in the 30s and the 40s. The Great Depression and food rationing in World War II. Now we always had 3 meals a day at our house. We had oatmeal, cornmeal, and miss a meal. Now nobody in my family liked miss a meal, so when we had that, we had enough leftovers for the next meal. Now the neighbors had it worse than we did. They ate saltine crackers for breakfast, drank water for dinner, and just swelled up for supper. And for supper, we would have poke roll and grits. Poke your feet under the table, roll your eyes, grit your teeth, and get up and forget about it. Them 4 one-liners from some old guys telling about it and just making fun of the hard times. But the truth is, back then, you didn't have insurance of any kind. You didn't go to the doctor if you're still breathing. And your neighbors had to be neighborly. We took care of each other, and you'd share. If a guy's house burned down and he lost everything, if his neighbor had 3 shirts, he got one of them and was glad to get it. It was just a different time. Nobody ever locked the door. That was here in the country. In 1947, my family moved to Flint, Michigan, and we all went to work for Chevrolet, building cars. And 3 of my brothers retired from Chevrolet, but all 5 of us worked there at times. I worked there from 1950 till 1961, with 2 years out in the Army. And my other brother worked there for 2 years before he went in the Army, and he come home from Korea and married a girl in California. She caught him in a weakened condition, and he lived out there for 50 years before he died.
During World War II, what years did General Motors not make domestic vehicles?
Uh, didn't make domestic vehicles. They made a 41 model and then they made a 46 model.
Yeah. So there was a 5-year period there.
Yeah,
Military took up all the vehicles.
yeah, they was making things. Fisher Body that made the bodies for the Chevrolet cars. They was making tanks. And Dad went up there and got a job in the tank plant. And he's working on that tank turret. Well, they had to move that to a fixture for him to work on with an overhead crane. And when it set it on that fixture, he had to clamp it down. Well, back even before that, we had an old stone fireplace in the house we lived on, and the way they handled the fireplace back in then, they'd cut a big round backlog. And he was putting a backlog on the fireplace and jammed this finger between the rock wall and the fireplace and broke it. It healed up and it was stiff, and he stuck it out like this when he was doing something. And he had it stuck out like that, and they set that tank turret on it and mashed it flat. And he got $735 for that. And he come home with that $735 and he bought a 80-acre farm. And back then, we was on the gold standard, and the government bought and sold gold for $35 an ounce. And Nixon didn't take us off of it until in the 70s. Well, my dad, in the late 60s, he died in 64, but I said late 60s, in the early 60s, he had to start taking disability Social Security in about 61. And it paid him $210 a month. That would have bought 6 ounces of gold. What would it take to buy 6 ounces of gold now? About $7,000.
Did you serve in a war?
Yeah, I was in Korea with
Korea.
the 24th Infantry Division when the ceasefire went into effect. Now, I wasn't there for a lot of the hard fighting. The Pusan Perimeter, the Heartbreak Ridge, Pork Chop Hill, Incheon Reservoir, and the Incheon Landing, that all took place before I got there. And them's the guys that you want to look for. Technically, I'm a Korean War vet, and I was there. But somebody else done all the hard fighting. So when on Veterans Day, I take my place over here with the cheerleaders because I know what they went through. But I did, they say, he who also serves who waits. And in the Army, you done a lot of waiting, hurry and wait.
So what were some of the cool cars and stuff that were back then? Or a car that you would have liked to have driven?
Oh, a car that I would have liked to have driven. They had a lot of cars back in the 50s that ain't around no more, and I don't remember all of them. The Hudson, the LaSalle, the Nash. How many of you have ever seen a Diamond T truck? A Rio? Wasn't too new, was it? No, they had all kinds of them. And my first car was a 1941 straight 8 Pontiac. Not a V8, a straight 8. And my next one was a 49 Chevrolet. And then I had a 52 Pontiac and a 53 Pontiac, straight 8s. And we'd drive all the way, when they shut down in July and August for model change, why we would come back down here. I'd bring my wife back down to see her folks. And we would drive on them 2-lane roads all the way to Springfield, Missouri from Flint. And we'd had about all we could take, and then we'd stop at a motel and spend the night and get in here the next morning. And what you would do, but about the time you drove from early morning to the middle of the afternoon or down toward traffic rush time, 4 o'clock, getting towards St. Louis, you could hear them pistons changing holes. You roll up the window and listen to see if everything's all right. And I started out with things that I wouldn't much want to go to town with today, and didn't think anything about it, because that's the way it was.
What about the river down where you live? How has it changed over the years?
Oh, that river, let me tell you about that. I've got a gripe about that river. The Goforth family lives across the river on the right-hand side, and they've been there over 100 years. Until 2011, they had kept a record. Every time the river got high enough to get in that barn, they marked the high water mark and dated it. And the high water mark was dated 1917 till 2011. And it come in above that. And since 2011, we've had 4 100-year floods. It's been over that 1917 mark. The last one we had was even higher than any of the rest of them. The water was running over the road this side of the bridge. It's running over the road up here on the 16 highway. And it was running over the road on 412 out there. Now, when you cross those bridges, you look and see how long they are. Well, what happened was, and I didn't find this out until recently, didn't even think about it. But in the late 1980s, the Lake Francis Dam went out. And then we didn't have any real big floods. And then here, all at once, this started flooding. Well, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had 7.5 inches of rain in 2 or 3 days. And the water was out all over my farm, down there, and backed up toward the bridge. And I got in a car and I went down to Oklahoma 59 and drove across the bridge down there. And below the bridge, the river was just banked full. But the old Lake Francis lake bed was full of water. And you look at that bridge and it's short. And it's been built since the 1980s. It and the railroad bridge. And what you've got is a series of dams and locks. All that water that drains from all this area comes down there, and it's in a bottleneck. And I called up they tell me that the new bridge for Highway 59 there by us is in the scheduled for 2020. So I called up the highway engineer for this area and tried to talk to him, but he didn't really care nothing about listening to me. He just kind of passed me off. So I've got to call into our state representative, and Congress, state legislature was in session, but when it's over with and she gets a chance, she's Robin Lindstrom's her name, she's going to come see me, and I'm going to show her what the problem is, because they're flooding us out every time that rains. We didn't used to do that, but it come way up there. It was running over the road this deep between my house and the bridge, and got in houses that never got in before. And no, boy, you go around that Washington County 801 road toward Watts above my house, get over there to Farley's camp. In 2011, he raised his house foundation 5 feet to get above that flooding. And the last time it flooded, it got in it again. We'll just have to see. But I can't do anything about it. They ain't gonna listen to me. One thing else I've learned in this life, people seem to think that government, politics, and politicians can solve our problems. That's wrong. They are the problem. Them people up there make me so mad, and then I have to stop and think, well, they are what they are. But they've been in there so long, they're out of touch. Now they want to take our guns away. Well, I want to tell you this, that Austin, Texas bomber, he used a clothespin to make the triggering device for his bombs and put them in a cardboard box. I'm going to petition Washington to ban clothespins and cardboard boxes so we'll all be safe.
Do you have any advice to pass on to the younger generation, your granddaughters maybe?
A whole bunch. I've been a Bible-believing Christian since back in the 50s. And one of the things that I've learned is God always does His part. The only problem is me doing mine. And people will say, well, I prayed and didn't get no answer. God always answers. He may say no, He may say yes, He may say wait. And sometimes people say, well, why does God allow this and that? If you read the 15th chapter of John, it tells you that Jesus said, I'm the true vine and you're the branches. The branches that don't bring forth fruit, my Father takes out and prunes so that He'll bring more fruit. Well, I found out that over the years that I needed a lot of pruning. And see, some people were raised in a Christian home with better role models than some of us. And I had a long ways to go. Still got a long ways to go. I'm still learning. But apart from that part, and I don't want to get on my soapbox. I'll leave you good advice. Keep your powder dry and your hammer cocked at all times. Did you notice how hard it is to do the right thing, even with the best of intentions? This old boy asked his wife, said, "Darling, what do you want for Christmas?" She said, "I want something that will go from 0 to 120 in 10 seconds flat." He said, "Baby, I'll get it for you." He bought her a bathroom scales.
If you get in trouble for some of those stories you're telling, don't come back on us.
Pardon?
So if you get in trouble for some of those stories you're telling, don't come back on us.
Well, that depends on where you show it.
No, it's just, it's.
You know, true stories is better than fiction. Did any of you know Dandy Go Smythe? You knew him?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll tell you a story on Dandy Go. You know where the Norwood Church is over there, and that the cemetery used to run through the middle of the church. I mean, the roads run through the middle of the cemetery. Well, you know, Dandy Go lived over there by where James Spears lives now. And he was working over on Norwood Prairie. Well, back then you worked from daylight to dark. Well, I don't know the old man's name, but there's an old man in the community that everybody knew, and he died and was buried there in Norwood Cemetery. And Dandy Go would coming back through that cemetery every night on the way home walking. And he was a little spooky, and someone found out that when he walked through the cemetery, he'd say, "How are you tonight, George?" or whatever his name was. Well, there was another guy that could imitate the old boy pretty well. He hid out there, and when Dandy Go said, "Hello, how you doing tonight?" Why, the old boy said, "Oh, not too good tonight, Dandy Go." Dandy Go run all the way home. Did you ever hear the term tall cotton? Being in tall cotton? Do you know where that come from? Well, I told you about picking cotton in a 40-acre field, and there were several families in there. There was 2 or 3 dozen people in there picking cotton. Well, in the field in certain places is lower than others, and you know how water will gather. And that that cotton, instead of being this high, was 5 feet high. There wasn't a job Johnny anywhere. And so every once in a while you'd see somebody heading for tall cotton. And so when you hear somebody say he was in tall cotton, it means he had it made. Is that thing still running?
Yeah, turn it off anytime you want, or if you want to just keep talking, we're good.
Well, I think I'd better shut up.